Hey guys, Matthew here. In this video, I want to talk to you guys about the split and trim tools. So these are like your kind of bread and butter of putting some geometry together that's a little bit more interesting than your general thing. So let's start off with a couple of lines on the page. So I'm going to make a line, and I'm going to make a line, and I'm going to make a line. And say, for example, I just want this middle bit here. Well, I could get it by, for example, scaling the line to so it's to here, and then scaling the line so it's to here, and now I have that bit there. But that's a bit arduous and a bit painful. So there's better ways of doing it. So this is where trim and split come in, and trim and split are synonymous of being a moment in which McNeil's thinking, or whoever chose to write the split and trim commands in a particular way. Yeah, they've generally made it annoying and difficult to pick up. So first off, let's look at trim. So I'm going to type in trim, T-R-I-M, and it'll ask me for the cutting objects first. So effectively it's asking me to pick up my knife. So okay, I want to use these two to cut this away and to cut this away. So I'm going to press enter, and then it says select objects to trim. So I'm going to click here, and that trims away, and I'm going to click here, and that trims away. So that's kind of quite simple. So the trim tool, you choose the knife first, and then you choose the object to cut second. That makes some sort of sense. So let's type in split, and now it asks for the objects to split. Okay, I'll split this one, and then it asks me for the knives. Okay, so I'll choose these two, and what that does is it splits the curve into 3 bits. Right? So I chose 2 knives, 1 and 2, and then I split it into 3 parts. So the biggest question here is, why did McNeil make the decision to reverse the order and make it very, very frustrating for people to learn? And to that, I don't really have an answer. But that's that. Now, that's how you can do it with lines. You can trim and split curves. So if I have a curve that's doing its thing, I've got another curve that's doing its thing on top of it. I could say, alright, well, I'm going to split this curve with that curve, and this curve will be broken into a whole series of smaller bits. And this curve will still maintain its kind of size. Alright, that's kind of cool. What else can I split and trim? Okay, so let's make a plane. So I've got a plane object. And let's draw some kind of cool curve on top of it. And this curve could be open, if and only if its edges are outside the plane, or it could be completely closed and entirely on it, or finally it could be closed and partially on it. And all 3 of these types of things can split and trim this surface. So if I select my closed one and trim, I can trim that away. If I select that, I can split it with the other 2, and now I've got all the bits. See? And I've got this kind of weird shaped surface. So curves that are on surfaces can trim them, and it's important to realize that the surface is actually not gone there. If I turn the points back on, or turn the points on for the first point, the object is still defined in the same way, and because of that, the information is still like there. So if I use a command called untrim, I can actually just get that information back by there we go, by clicking on the surface, and it'll there we go, untrim, 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 and it returns us back to where we were. So it doesn't actually delete the information behind it, it just stops visualizing it. And this is to do with the way that NURBS objects are defined, that you can't actually get rid of that information, you can only just kind of like turn it off. So I'm going to rebuild this surface, and I'm going to turn the points on, and I'm going to make it look all cool and awesome and stuff. And okay, move these up. Okay, I'll move some points down. I'll choose these points to move down. Okay, I'll move these up as well, just to start kind of maintaining it. Kind of sits in a particular realm of kind of reasonability. Move vertical, move these up as well. There we go, cool. So I'm happy with this kind of object, okay? Now, clearly, this won't be able to trim this. So if I have this, and I say, okay, I'm going to split you with this, it doesn't make much sense to split it, although it does. So what happens is the curve gets projected onto the surface. So if I undo that, and I do it, say, in a perspective view, and I say, okay, I'm going to trim you, I'm going to use you to trim you, it projects it vertically up. So it projects it in the direction of the C-plane. So you might want a little bit more control of how you begin to project things, and the way to project an object onto a surface is to just select the objects you want to project, and then type, you know it, project, and select the surface, and voila, those curves are actually on that surface, and I can also just trim them away. And that's fine. So now when we turn points back on, you'll notice that those points are still there from even though the surface is gone. And I can edit the surface by moving it vertically up still, which is pretty cool. And I can take these points as well and move them vertically, and voila, I can edit the surface, and these holes will be maintained because the surface is basically this network of points fundamentally, and I can always still untrim them like so. There we go. Untrim this one. Yeah, got it. Cool. So you can trim and split surfaces with curves, but also if we delete all the curves, you can also split and trim surfaces with surfaces. So if I took this surface and I copied it, like so, and then I take this one and I rotate it 3D along this axis here by 90 degrees, like so, and I move it so I know that it intersects the thing. So at the moment, here, it doesn't actually trim off an area, so the trim won't work. So if I select this guy, and say trim this guy, it should have a trouble with it. And a lot of the time you do that, see, it intersected on the other side. So I stuffed up there, but it didn't have the result I wanted, right? Whereas I know that if I select this guy, I can trim this guy away, this bit here, and because that is completely and utterly intersected by the other thing. This little gap here prevents that trim from happening the way that we want. So you need to make sure your objects actually intersect and trim away really, really well. So this works really, really well with complex objects, but I guess the easiest way to visualize it and to remember it is to think about it just working with a couple of planes. So I'm going to make a plane. I'm going to make it, some given size. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to rotate 3D it so it's in the other direction. I'm going to move it to intersect the mid, and move its mid down to intersect there. So cool, completely intersects. So if I have, I'm going to copy the whole system over as well to create a couple of different examples. So 20, 40, 60. Cool. So that should be enough. So there's no problem here, right? I can trim this, and that's fine. A lot of the time, though, if I wanted to trim this in half, so this will work fine with simple geometry. If I wanted to trim this in half, and it was a bit of a more complex object, that this instance here might look like it intersects, or it might intersect within a tolerance, but the tolerance isn't high enough. So sometimes you might get errors, and the computer might tell you that it's not actually intersecting. And when you get that issue, all you need to do is just scale up your cutting object a little bit to make sure that it definitely intersects it. So if I was getting an error saying, no, I can't trim that top off, I could use that to trim away the top quite easily, and there's no problem anymore. But you've got to remember that if this is scaled to be smaller than it, and this is where the problem comes in, we're working at the threshold condition here. So we're working at the point where it's perfect. when you're working where this is bigger, well, clearly it intersects, and then when it's smaller, it doesn't mean anything to trim that away, so that's a problem. So there's these three different conditions. So the cutting object might be too small, the cutting object is too big, and that's fantastic. That's what you'd actually prefer. But if the cutting object is curvy, there's some things you have to do to start thinking about it, and the cutting objects are the same size. And the last important thing we learnt was untrim, which is that the information is never gone. It's just hidden away from you. And that's the trim and split command. So these are really, really important. These are like the loft tool at levels of importance. So you should look at them, you should play around with them in detail, and you should memorize them, because these are your basic kind of bread and butter of joining things together. See you in the next video.